The Atlantic is a patient beast, vast and indifferent. On a cool July night in 2013, 12 miles off the coast of Nigeria, it was gathering its strength. Harrison Okene knew this water well. He was the cook aboard the Jacson 4, a powerful anchor-handling tugboat. The work was grinding but routine. Tonight, they were towing an oil tanker through the chop. He was in the galley at 4:30 a.m., preparing a meal that no one would ever eat. The weather had been souring for hours, waves growing into dark, bruising shapes against the hull. The feeling did not start with a violent crash. It began with an unnatural tilt, a slow, agonizing list that felt fundamentally wrong. The groaning of the ship's metal rose to a piercing shriek. Before anyone could react, a colossal rogue wave slammed the Jacson 4 sideways. The 4,000-ton vessel was immediately overwhelmed. Inside the galley, everything erupted into chaos. Okene was thrown violently across the room as the ship's internal geometry warped around him. Water, black and frigid, surged in through broken windows and hatches. The world turned upside down, literally. He felt the crushing pressure of the sea as the tugboat began its rapid, irreversible descent. There was no time to think, only to react. Okene was a powerful swimmer, but this was not swimming. This was wrestling with a sinking structure. He fought his way toward the chief engineer's office, hoping to find a hatch or a way out. Then came the final plunge. The lights died. The world became absolute, suffocating darkness. The noise was unimaginable. The sound of 12 men screaming, the grinding screech of metal buckling, the violent rush of water filling every cavity. Okene was trapped in an internal hallway, swimming blindly downwards, following a faint sense of where the high point might be in this submerged nightmare. The salt water was already biting into his skin, and the pressure in his ears was terrifying. He hit something hard, a closed door. He pushed through it, and suddenly, mercifully, he found it. A pocket of air. It was not a large space. He had stumbled into the engineer's changing room, a small section near the stern. As the boat settled, inverted, 30 meters beneath the surface, a small volume of air had been compressed into the highest point of the room. He estimated it was barely 4 feet of vertical space above the waterline, maybe 6 feet wide. He hauled himself onto a thin metal ledge, shivering uncontrollably. The air smelled of diesel, hydraulic fluid, and terror. He listened to the sounds of the dying ship. For a long time there was only the sound of rushing water settling, dripping, and the terrible silence that followed. The silence that told him he was utterly alone. All 11 other crew members were gone. The first few hours were dominated by panic. He screamed until his throat was raw, knowing that sound could not escape the steel coffin surrounding him. He beat his fists against the hull, hoping for a miracle, for a ship to be passing overhead. The water was impossibly cold. It soaked his work clothes, leaching the warmth from his body. Hypothermia began its slow, deliberate attack. He realized he could not stay on the metal ledge forever. He would eventually have to sit with his lower body submerged in the 70-degree water just to save his remaining energy. The darkness was the worst torment. It was not just the absence of light. It was a physical weight, a suffocating blanket that pressed against his eyeballs. He could not see his own hand inches from his face. This was not a movie. There was no emergency beacon, no source of light, no radio. Only the groaning and popping of the tugboat structure, fighting the crushing pressure of the sea. Day 1 passed in a haze of freezing tremors and mounting despair. Thirst became a physical, agonizing force. He was surrounded by 1,000 metric tons of water, yet none of it was drinkable. His lips cracked and his tongue swelled. He knew if he panicked, he would waste the precious oxygen in his tiny bubble. He began rationing his breaths, moving only minimally. Fear was his constant companion. Every sound was magnified by the surrounding water, the tapping of debris, the settling of the wreck. the sound of tiny sea creatures brushing against the hull. He was convinced that the air pocket was slowly shrinking, that the massive volume of water above would eventually push the last breath out of his reach. Then, there were the shadows. He knew they were not real, but in the absolute darkness, his mind conjured shapes. Darker than the dark, moving just beyond the edge of his submerged feet. He was sitting in the changing room. He knew where the lockers were. What if something had floated in? What if the marine life, drawn by the smell of diesel or by the corpses nearby, had found their way in? He fought the urge to close his eyes, fearing that if he slept he might never wake up. Or worse, he might wake up to the air bubble having collapsed. Day 2 arrived, indistinguishable from day 1. Time had ceased to exist. It was just cold, thirst, and darkness. Okene was reciting verses from the Bible, repeating the Lord's Prayer hundreds of times. He was preparing to meet his God. Above the waves, the search was grim. After 48 hours, the vessel owners had dispatched a specialized dive team from South Africa. Their mission was explicitly stated. It was a recovery operation. They were looking for bodies. No one survived a capsize at 30 meters after 2 days. It was simply impossible. The team, led by a seasoned diver named Tony, began the dangerous descent into the unstable wreck. The visibility was poor, thick with silt stirred up by the disaster. They started documenting the gruesome scene. They swam through the ship's hallways, finding the bodies of Okene's crewmates, twisted and trapped in the wreckage. Each recovery was handled with practiced solemnity. They were near the engine room, moving slowly through a passage, confirming that all life was extinct. Tony was filming the wreckage with a helmet camera, documenting the structural damage. The silence 30 meters down is profound, broken only by the hiss of the divers' regulators and the muffled sounds of their own movements. And then, a sound. A dull, metallic tock. Tony stopped. His regulator paused. He signaled to his partner. "Did you hear that?" Silence. Just the hiss. He continued moving. "Tock! Tock!" It was rhythmic. It was deliberate. Tony signaled frantic confusion and horror to his partner. What was making that sound? A ghost of the wreck? Debris shifting? He swam toward the source of the tapping, pushing through a hatchway into the engineer's changing room. His helmet camera, recording for posterity and evidence, captured the moment perfectly. He saw a hand. It was pale, bloated, seemingly lifeless, drifting barely above the waterline in the tiny air pocket. Tony instinctively reached out to touch it, expecting the cold, rubbery feel of a corpse. And the hand grabbed him. Okene, having heard the strange noise of the divers outside, had used the last of his energy to hammer on the hull with a metal tool he had found. When the sound stopped, he waited, stretching his arm out into the black water. The shock nearly caused Tony to bolt. He retracted his hand, shining his powerful dive light directly into the small space. There, in the narrow beam, was Harrison Okene. Naked, hypothermic, eyes wide and red, but undeniably alive. 72 hours, 3 full days submerged, surviving on a handful of breaths in a collapsing steel box. The ensuing rescue was agonizingly slow. Okene was weak and severely distressed. To bring him up too quickly would kill him, as nitrogen would rapidly bubble in his blood, a fatal condition known as the bends. The dive team had to immediately fit him with a specialized helmet and a decompression line, locking him into the pressurized world of saturation diving for another 60 hours, gradually raising him back to the surface meter by painful meter. When he finally emerged, blinking into the harsh sunlight, he was the sole survivor of the Jacson 4 tragedy. The footage of the moment of discovery remains one of the most astonishing pieces of marine archaeology ever captured. A ghostly diver meeting a living ghost, deep within the crushing abyss. It is a stark, chilling testament to the resilience of the human spirit. Harrison Okene did not simply survive. He waited out death, trapped in the darkest place on Earth, and lived to tell the tale.